put in a lot of time, and you're watching them, and there's kind of something, an invisible shield, dustiness, that they're not really connecting with you. You're not connecting with your audience. You're dancing well, you're smiling, and yet for the audience, you as an audience, you don't feel really involved. And you're not going to be moved and touched. So I felt that even though as a student one will learn a little bit you'll learn about the text, and you'll be taught something about expressions, and yet how to make the Abhinaya real is something that in a way is very simple, and like everything, it's simple when you know how, and simple things, profound things are very simple. So, in the simplest way, believable Abhinaya requires three things: understanding, feeling, and showing, or revealing. Now, the understanding part means going much more deeply than just being told what the words mean. And we all bring things to the text as we approach it. And so you know that when you get a particular text, if it's, say, from Ramayana, Mahabharata, any of the epics, that you have all kinds of connotations. If you're doing Sita, you know what this means in certain ways. But there's so much more to know. I brought along just a couple of books as samples. I mean, of course, if you're doing Geeta Govinda, then you want to have Barbara Stoller-Miller's and several others. And then the old classics like Ananda Kumar Swami on Shiva, so you get your background. Those things are there. Actually, I've got like about, I don't know how many rows of shelves, but I just went to a shelf and I just pulled out whatever came up as samples. Now this is a lovely, complete work of Kalidasa by a very wonderful translator, friend Chandra Rajan from Sahityā Akademi. If you ever are going to do anything from Kalidasa, this is a good translation to work with. And I had done a production for Doordarshan some years ago, which was 5 different heroines or characters from different Kalidasa plays, and we kind of went starting from nature up through Shakuntala, the unsmelt flower, up then to Malavika, who's bride, and then we went to Meghadut and Apsara, and then ending with Parvati. And in each one, because each segment, this is at television, so you're very condensed, each one is like 5 minutes total, which will include text and pure dance. And yet each one must be therefore even more true to that essential thing to carry down. So that's that. Here's another nice book, things like this, Hindu Goddesses. I'm sure most of you know this one, David Kinsley, Visions of the Divine Feminine. Many of us do the Gayatri Mantra. And Gayatri Mantra is such a rich, short poem that's part of many Hindus' daily practice. You're evoking the blessings of light, and yet it's the light of intelligence. So this is a small text only on Gayatri Mantra by Sadhguru Sant Keshavasan, the highest meditation. And the whole thing giving you new ideas, which means you could develop a whole program on Gayatri Mantra, or you could have some sancharis, or you can just bring a great richness to, doing it once, and it's not just the superficial level. Vaishnava sex, Shiva sex, mother worship. This is very important. Wherever you get this information, whether or not your interpretation is Sahaja, whether it's Chaitanya, actually, which interpretation will give a very great richness to. And the thing is that every poet is coming from a particular tradition. So that will give you the context of why that poet is making certain choices. So something like this, which is on these different sects, then you'll know when you have an era and you know that your poet is 14th century, 17th century, and he's from here or he's from there, and what is the context, the subtext that's informing his images. You know, for instance, like we all know the story that when Jayadev was writing the Geeta Govind, that when it came to the part of Krishna apologizing to Radha and touching her feet, he couldn't write that as a devotee. Right? He couldn't do it. So, story, he went and took his bath, went to lunch, found out from his wife that he'd already eaten, had already shown up, and then discovered that whoever it was in his guise that had shown up and eaten had also finished the text that he didn't feel comfortable to write. You know, and then there's also the things about Jayadev's wife. Who was she? And how did she inspire the story? So again, you fill in the flesh and blood of the relationship of this connection of divine and profane. Here's another one just on bhakti and bhakti movement. Okay. So anyway, text, subtext, all of these things and understanding it very richly. And it's very worthwhile since even if you are a Sanskrit scholar yourself, there still will be many other interpretations and understandings from other scholars. For those of us who are not Sanskrit scholars, or scholars of other languages, Indian languages, going to the people who you truly trust is the way that you're going to, you know, really get the richness. I mean, I've always felt that the disadvantage of not being fluent in Indian languages really worked to an advantage because of that awareness. And I think we're all somewhat illiterate in other languages to some extent. It means that whatever language it is, you need to really go into it with somebody who knows that you trust, that can give you the context. And what it means is that, for instance, if I don't speak Telugu but I'm doing Tyagaraja, then it means that I don't have the facility to just go through all of the texts, everything of Tyagaraja, and choose something. So I will depend on someone who is a scholar and knows arts, and I'll narrow it down to what is it that you want to do. And one thing we didn't talk yesterday was about doing your own choreography. Except to the extent that you learn as a student to replicate what you're taught. At a certain point, you have to have the freedom, but you have to also know the limits so that you can be really free within the parameters of expression. Now, when it comes to doing your own choreography, something like Tyagaraja as an example, he was a great Ram Bhakt. If you are also a Ram Bhakt, that is going to be a lot of things to choose from. If you are not a Ram Bhakt, then you are going to have to find what speaks to you that's worth your time to put in. So in discussing it with a friend who was fluent in all of it, I said, okay, I want X, Y, and Z, I don't want this. I mean, this is not the time to be doing a critique of the Ram legend, when you're dancing at a Tyagaraja festival or at Ram Namami. That's something you can do at Kamani in Delhi, if you want to do a critique. So, taking a song, for instance, Nidhi Sala Sukhama. Nidhi Sala Sukhama is basically, Tyagaraja is visited by the king's men who say, please, the king has called you to court. You are highly honored. He has sent a palanquin for you. And then, the dialogue with his deity. Do I want this or do I want that? Material rewards, spiritual rewards, and then all the variations. Now, this is nothing could be more topical than this. So you find a poem like that, and then it's like you can really play with it. What kind of greediness, what kind of soul satisfaction from doing something with ethics and shield, and that you're happy. You know, so that was easy. Or stories like, and then there's also, you can take things that are well known. I love taking things that are well known. Like, for instance, going to Kerala and then taking like a lullaby that everyone knows, Omanatingo, something that everyone grew up with, and then bringing it to life, or things like that. But one thing is, when you are either choosing a piece to choreograph, or if you have enough repertoire, choosing what to perform, you have to do what you can do with integrity. You have to be able to relate to the song. And that might seem not an issue. Well, these are all mythological and important things. And yet, if you're doing your guru's choreography, I found that when there's a beautiful Oriya song, Vatsalya Ras, which is all about telling Yashoda telling Krishna, go to sleep, because if you don't go to sleep, the boogeyman's going to get you. And all these bad things that are going to happen. And all of these things that in truth go so much against everything that I believe about child rearing, that even though I love the choreography, I don't want to put myself in that space and do that. So it's a choice just not to do it. I learned it but never performed it. So there are some things like that. Okay, so understand, and then we talked about feeling. Once you understand it, then you have to genuinely feel it. You have to internalize it. I mean, one of the reasons that we love dance is that we have a kinetic response to things. And that we are revealing something to an audience that they will not get from words. If they can get it all from the words, we don't need to get up there. What we're doing, whether the words are there or not, is letting them taste it, feel it, see it. I mean, we're bringing it into this immediate space that's a shared space, which is very interesting because it's a stylized space. There are certain conventions about how close, how real, and yet you are giving this experience. You are actually a conduit for a darshan, for a vision, for a divine vision of something that hopefully is going to be like Yashoda looking in Krishna's mouth and to take the mud out and finding the universe. So that's the aim. I mean, how far you get, of course, it depends. But if you don't aim, you won't get anywhere if you're just getting up and entertaining. So fundamentally, you've got to be genuine. You have to be real. You have to, number one, you have to care about your audience. You have to believe that they're going to get it. You have to feel that you're not casting pearls before swine. I mean, that's a silly thing to say, and yet we've all seen artists where you see them up there and their energy is inside, they're not giving it out, and they are dancing, and clearly you as the audience are being allowed to see them. So that you are being allowed to be a voyeur, to see this great vision, this gift to the human planet, right? And there they are, and they're like that. And you get to peek in and to see it. As opposed to that feeling, instead of it being here and they're like that, but taking your energy and putting it out there, putting it in a shared space, a more vulnerable space. Not really. I mean, one of the things is that because it is performer and audience, you are able to offer something that is incredibly intimate in connecting, and yet it's safe. Unless what you're offering on the stage is going to be available at the back door to a stage door Johnny, then you've got no barriers. But if yesterday there was a question about sensuality, and I was saying that sometimes dancers are confusing the beauty and the sensual looks of Odissi in particular, or other forms, and being too lascivious, really, in their looks, right? But again, you have to have this separation. You're giving yourself. Okay, so being generous of yourself, genuinely being generous, giving yourself. And if you're insecure, which we all are, you'd leave that when you enter the stage. Because if your spine is contracted, if your heart is contracted, if you're feeling like, I'm not in good form and I'm not really very good and they're not going to like me or something, you're going to come out there, you're wasting everybody's time. So you have to be brave and you have to have courage. And before you come out on the stage, you have to thank everyone for being willing to give their time and allowing you to come out and do only the best that you can do in this particular time and space. Okay, you're never going to give the ultimate program. So you're doing what you can, and you are unique. Okay, so you just come out there and give it. And the audience then, whether they are experienced rasikas, whether they are people who are dragged there by a family member, whether they've got a headache or indigestion, you're trying to provide wherever they're coming at, you want them to go out at another level. And that's what you want to do. And so to do that, you have to reveal. You have to give that, what your feeling is, you have to let it show. Okay. Now, what I thought I'm going to do today, two things. We're going to actually take some lines with you and like see how we interpret them. But what I thought of, instead of showing a piece, I'm going to take two very short slokas, and we talk about, we're always using the word internalized abhinaya. It's a nice word, and generally it means that it seems real. It's real. But I can't imagine any abhinaya not being internalized. I mean, if you're not internalized, it's not there. It's not there at all. So what I want to show is two short slokas where one is the internalized abhinaya, which is what we usually do when we are describing a deity. So I'm just taking the Namani Vignaraja, which is the very first short sloka in praise of Ganapati that every Odissi dancer learns. And then I just want to contrast that with a sloka by Balamurli Krishna, where instead of externally describing the divine, one is, you are the divine. And so you can see the difference of the thing. Now what I want to do is with the first one, I'm not sure if it's better to do it first or dissect it first.
I think it would be nice to do. So we can have a first.
Do it first,
yes,
and then dissect it.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Put on the first CD. Okay, so this is after the dancer has entered, after you've done your Bhumi Pranam, and then comes the Devata Pranam. happening here is that when we're doing a Devta Pranam, so here's the beginning of your subtext. We're asking for something. We are asking Ganapati, please give me pure understanding. Let me start this performance right. Give me what I need to do it. Before we make this request, we are praising him. It's the same way that to any friend, you butter them up. You're looking so nice. I love your earrings. That sweater suits you. Can I borrow 50 rupees? So we're doing this, okay, with full confidence or full hopes that we're going to get it. Now, when you even start, there's all kinds of funny things that happen because of not really thinking about what you're doing. So first of all, just a simple pranam, Namami. Where is Ganesh? And he shouldn't be moving all over the place. So if you decide where he is, I would put him slightly up, not too far up, so the audience doesn't have to look at your chin. And then you could put him in a small place and do it there, but you have to make a decision. And it's not like right or wrong, but you've got to know what you're doing and decide. So place him somewhere. So when you're doing this pranam, then after that, what are you doing? You're talking to him. So therefore, you're showing in this particular pose, you could be doing anything to show him, but here he is with his ladder. And I'm looking at him. I'm telling him, what a joy it is to see him. So first of all, when you're doing this isn't something that you're showing to the audience or looking at them. So you have to think of that. Now, I've noticed that 5 out of 10 dancers, when they do twam, they do this. Watch. They've gone Namami, Vignaraja, twam. Well, it's like, hello, how are you? Now, logically, I see why it happens is that you're in a position and then you're stepping diagonally. You're stepping forward, but you tend to step on a diagonal. So you're here and you go this way. But that's no reason why by moving that way your hands still can't be front. And if you're not doing it, it's because, your brain isn't connected to the words. This is like the very, very most essential beginning, and it's the first little thing the dancers learn. If your teacher is allowing you to do this or teaching you, it means that they haven't thought. That they had beginning classes when they were 8 or 9, and now they're a teacher, without having thought about it. Okay, so twam, you. And then we're saying you're under the kalpa vriksha tree. So we're saying, okay, I'm going to ask you for something. You're sitting under the wish-fulfilling tree. You can give anything. So this is the first, makan, the first buttering up. So you have to be as you would with somebody. You have to be very, it's not just any old tree. It's this just absolutely wonderful, wonderful tree with everything hanging from it. And that's for you, how you feel about that. But it has to all connect. So the connecting from you, and because of the words, how they go, you've got your tree, and then you're showing that he's sitting there. So that's one sentence has to connect. Okay, most everybody gets through that fine. Then, what's next? Uma. All right. So here, the line is, Uma, the female power of the universe, is very proud of this son, and then we describe how he's proud. Proud because he has this great presence, because Ganapati would never be called fat, right? He's healthy. His wonderful, his tusks and his dancing. Okay, so first of all, when you do Uma, this is an opportunity to become Uma. So the sloka is speaking to Ganapati, and yet you are Uma for this moment. So in order to do that, you have to find the way. Now what I do is that as I take the pose, I center myself, I feel it, and then I slowly let my vision come up. So that you feel, you choose your shrine, and you choose your image of Devi, and you feel that. You feel that expression, you feel whether there's a slight smile on her lips, you feel her eyes as she's giving darshan to someone, and for just that moment, you turn and you become her. Which her? That's you, right? But you have to be her. It can't just be, I'm in a pose now. Yeah. Don't I look nice? I mean, then what are you doing? Okay, and even the hands. I mean, there might be some variations in how your teacher tells you to put, whether it's this or that. But sometimes people are so vague, it's just a pose. All right. Now, when she's holding her son, here, as I was taught, he's placed on the knee, and I'm showing his height about like this. There are variations, some people are doing this, but he's definitely not leaning sideways. I mean, again, hands, for how you're showing what you're showing, need to be consistent in terms of what one would learn in a drama or pantomime class. We see someone holding a baby, and the next thing you know, they've squeezed the life out of it. Or they're holding the baby, and they're holding it like that or something. I mean, even though it's stylized, you have to maintain the conventions to a certain extent. Okay, so here you are, and however you got him, this is the size that you're making. So make him sit upright on your knee. All right, and then you show this large presence. Again, be aware of what you're doing. If you just learned a step, which is that you step, prista down with the hands and back, and your hands come down like this, you may have a skinny one. So just be aware of that here. And his wonderful tusks and his great dancing. And then we go on to his father. Again, for one moment, you should be Shiva. I mean, it's a wonderful feeling to try to do that, because you are not only Shiva, you're Nataraj. So for one moment, you circle around, and you come up, and now you're going to look into the vastness. You're going to look into the vastness. You're standing on this dwarf of ignorance, and you are there dissolving the universe. What could be more fun than to try to be that and do that for a moment? Okay, and you want to hit that. It's really nice. Okay, and then you have just a father who loves his son. Right here. The hand is behind the back, and this hand is here. Sometimes this isn't clear at all. Sometimes, one goes from, the line is that Shiva is very proud of his son, who is an even better dancer than he is, which is a pretty absurd statement, but in terms of praising, as he dances with snakes in his hands. Right? So this has to be very clear that this. So again, this child that was on the knee is now standing here, and your hand is behind him. Now, the choreography can obviously be quite different. This is, he could be on your knee. He could be somewhere else. You could be standing and be doing that. You can do many, many variations to show this thing. But whatever you're doing, it should be realistic that he's there. And then with the snakes. And then comes the request, that please each day pure, and pure is always this or this, right? And buddhi, and to accept it. Another thing is that when you really own the lines, and of course this is nothing because it's just one line that's straight through and it's done. But when you have like lines of poetry and a text, then the more you go to it, and the more you feel it, and the more you reveal it, then the more freedom you will have to have your own play with it. And that's why it isn't an issue then if you're doing something and the singer sings extra lines, because you're in that space and then you just carry on in it instead of like, but it's over what I learned, and you carry on. Okay, so does anybody have any questions?
Actually, I have a question.
Sure.
About something that you said before about the choosing of the poetry or any text that we have to work on. So is it acceptable, according to what we have said yesterday, to take poetry that doesn't belong to Oriya tradition and to use Oriya Abhinaya, which I think, as you said yesterday, is different from the way you're walking or just moving? So this.
Yeah, that's a good question. There are different answers, of course, but my answer is absolutely. With the caveat that the aesthetics of classical Indian dance may or may not be suitable for everything that one could do that is art. In other words, I haven't attempted and would not choose to do something on the Holocaust in Odissi. I think that art that does that, I mean, it's very important art, but the aesthetics of this form won't go to that. Here's my parameters for going into other languages. First of all, when we do our invocation, we are doing an invocation which is appropriate to do not only to Ganesh, who removes obstacles, or Saraswati, goddess of learning and music. They're always standard and they're always acceptable. But you can also do an invocation to the appropriate deity of where you are. So that's why the first time that I went to Kerala, I made an invocation on Padmapatra, because Tiruvananthapuram is about reclining Vishnu. So I made an invocation to him. When I've gone to dance like in Varanasi, then even though, again, one could certainly do Saraswati, you can certainly do Ganapati, but then I'll take some poetry that would be either to Ganga or to Shiva, so I choose for the place. And then, when I gave a performance for Indo-US Solar Cooperation, I did an invocation to Surya. So that Surya invocation would be used when I'm dancing at like an IIT or a Georgia Tech, because energy is the god of the people that you're performing for. And so the metaphor in terms of Hindu tradition for that power would be Surya. Okay, so I mean, these are the ways that I have moved into choreography without feeling that like I'm doing something like very iconoclastic. Now the other thing though is that again, when it was in Kerala, I used to go there quite a bit. So looking at the poetry and what would suit, I know it was I think it was Kerala Kalamandalam Diamond Jubilee. So what am I going to do there? And it's very nice to do things in people's language, I felt. And also I'm not afraid of it because it's not any harder or easier than doing it in Oriya or Sanskrit. They're all different languages, so they're all like, I've got nothing to peg it on to, and I'm going to have to remember the text and the things that go with it instead of just, know it. Swati Tirunel. Wonderful, wonderful poetry, and also poetry that I chose a piece, Aliveni, which is the same sort of lyrical sensuality that you have in Geeta Govind. Okay, so the piece is being done in another language, and yet it's totally appropriate, in my opinion, and in the opinion of everybody who's seen it, of the Odissi aesthetic. I do remember one time, though, I did a program that was called In Praise of Krishna, Nectar of the Blue Lord, and I kind of followed the different Abhisarga, different stages, of Radha and Krishna, and then I did each one in a different language. So I had Bengali and Kashmiri or in Sanskrit and whatnot. And I found that an Oriya scholar was adamantly upset about me having chosen something by Vidyapati. He was very upset that I had done something in Bengali. So, so what does this mean? Does that mean, I was kind of touched that he cared so much. But to me, it seemed funny because they're close. And it seems like he would have minded more some other language. And yet, as we all know, cousins and brothers fight more than, people who know each other less. So I don't think that, so he was expressing this feeling that you're saying. It's like, it's not Oriya. But he didn't object as much to the others. It's like, why do that when you could do this? I feel that, you see, look, when the Bhakti movement happened, you're talking like 1600s, 16th century, whatever, things coming into the language that people could understand is what made it accessible. That's when you get like the Gotipur tradition and all of this. So it is arguably a good thing for people to have access to their philosophies, rather than it being in a language that people don't know. If you are dancing in Orissa and you're only dancing in Orissa, then it's fine. But why not if you're doing it somewhere else to make it accessible? However, I would say one caveat. I don't tend to do things in English. And I think the reason is that I don't think that I know any Oriya singer who could sing an English text as well as it would need to be sung. And also, not only an Oriya singer, but actually, I didn't mention, if I do something in South India, I don't have it sung by an Oriya singer. I would have two singers, because you have to have the integrity of the music. So that means that the music is an Oriya composition, the pakawaj is there, but the singing is in its own tradition. So you see, now here's what you get into. You've got all of these nuances. What is right? What is wrong? What is aesthetic? What is acceptable? There is no hard and fast line. You know how you feel, which may shift or may stay steady, and other people will feel differently. I mentioned yesterday that by tradition, somebody would be immersed only in their own tradition. They'd be very senior before they would start to do choreography, and then it would be fine. So when you have Guru Kevacharan Mahapatra doing something in the Ramayana, which is not Oriya tradition, whatever that is, no one is going to question whether or not he's doing something beyond the pale. Because he can't do anything beyond the pale. He breathes it, it's his pores. However, when anybody has other influences, there's a great risk of like, what are you going to do? For instance, take the example of accompaniment. There are dancers who use tabla, and because they've grown up with tabla, and it's part of their heart and soul, there's nothing wrong with that. Personally, I would never use tabla in an Odissi dance. I couldn't. It would give me indigestion. But that's just me. That's not right or wrong. Yeah.
No, actually I was saying, I think everyone is free to use tabla, but then it's difficult to call it Odissi because you are really taking out some that is so much structural of the dance. I mean, it's like keeping out the stamping of the feet.
Yes.
It's structural. So if you keep it out, then it's not more Odissi.
That's right. And these things about when you crossed a line or not crossed a line, are shifting in aesthetics. I mean, hopefully, what is true, like pure gold, will survive, and the other things will be there, and they don't last. I think pretty much that's what happens. Just like, for instance, we do all these jugalbandis. You get together, you have a couple of styles together. Usually they're not performed, they're not so finely created that they have a real sustaining power. But they can, they could become a wonderful thing to hold on to. But mostly it's just interesting to see people in two styles and how they bend and how they turn and how they walk and and it's interesting. But it's not an art that you want to return to. It's just, for the moment. Let's see, there was something you said that I wanted to just comment on. Yes. I also, first of all, obviously all classical traditions are organic. They're all changing, they're all growing. I think that people could be a little more careful about when they're saying that something is in a form or when they're saying it's based on a form. Because if one has a strong training in a particular art form and you're using that to inform your creation about something, but you're, basically drawing on other things, then that should be said, rather than calling it Odissi. And for instance, I've been asked over the years many times when there's been certain festivals or seminars about how I have fused Odissi and Chhau. And my answer is, I don't. Now, I would definitely use Chhau in theater work, and the Chhau definitely comes into my modern dance. But if I'm doing Odissi, I'm doing Odissi, and if I'm doing Chhau, I'm doing Chhau. I don't need to smush them together. They're already close. They're very close. I gave a talk years ago in the Music Academy in Madras, and Saskia Kirstenboom, the scholar, had said that she never understood how similar. But this is just a slight deviation from the theme of today. But it's like the idea that in Tribhuvan, you have this very, very feminine form, and then you just move your foot out, change your energy, and you have this incredibly masculine form. So the relationship of Odissi and Chhau is so close. And if you take a Chhau piece, like say Autonopriya, which is more feminine, which is a Lasya piece. If you take a Lasya Chhau piece, and you add in the words being sung, as opposed to not having the words, you've basically got something that's like Gotipura, and then you just shift it a little, and then, it's just a shift. It's, they're not there. They're just along the line, very, very close. But the only time that I've ever combined is in my Mahadevi Upasana. It's like a 1-hour piece, and in the Purana about Pralaya, and Shiva's dancing. So I'm using, because it's Shiva and he's in the middle, so he's doing like a Chhau Paran. But I mean, that's it. That's it. You know. See, it's the same thing with language. Again, another language analogy. If you are speaking one language and you're talking to someone who knows another language that you know, you enjoy bringing in some words that are particularly rich. But it's a conscious choice while you're doing it. But if you're talking to someone and you're bringing in words because you don't know the word to use, if you don't have control, if you don't have closure in one language, that's when you've got to pull in stuff from other languages. I mean, you have a problem with, with, say, children who, in India, they go to an English medium school, they're not getting fabulous English, but their Hindi's getting messed up too. And so they don't really have complete mastery of one language. And it's very unfortunate. So what you get with dance fusions is the same thing. Too often, someone really doesn't have, they're not really articulate in one language. And so they're like, fine, we'll do fusion. And so they just, mix everything up. As opposed to making a conscious choice about what you want to have. So, in that way, I've been very lucky, because I had 17 years of ballet and modern dance before I came, and then I did Manipuri, Odissi, and Chhau. So if someone says, we want you to do a Sarojini Naidu poem, I look at the poem, and I think, I'm going to do this in modern dance. Because, see, when you're doing modern dance, you can bring in anything that is a part of your vocabulary. How you walk, if you can walk on your hands, roller skate. I mean, it's legitimate to use everything that your body knows and explores and wants to do. So it's fine. But, this is something that one always revisits. Another thing is that in my opinion, I have seen absolutely superb, the top artists in certain classical traditions who have decided over the years that they needed to do something that was different. Or they needed to change, or they needed to evolve, or they needed to experiment. And and sometimes, of course, the results will be good. But I've seen absolutely fall-on-your-face disaster results because they are totally in control of one aesthetic, but they haven't any idea how to use space in a different way, or how to do other things. And so it's just a horrible patchwork, of shapes and forms and things. Okay. So one thing about going into different languages is that, first of all, motivation. It's just like with a musician. Some might have a few ragas and they go deep for their whole life, and others love to innovate and create ragas. So again, it's your own personality. I tend not to create something new because of the interest in something of newness. So people like in Delhi will say, okay, well, so what are you doing new, right? And my feeling is, I'll do something that I understand, a reason to do it. So when someone says, for instance, over the years, do something about the girl child, my feeling is, instead of me taking my time and your money to create something on this, to do it IIC for an audience that doesn't need to see this, I would suggest you take your money and put signs on buses that the father is responsible for the gender of a child. You know, I mean, you see, what am I going to get aesthetically? What are you going to get aesthetically from me taking a theme like this? On the other hand, if I take something like Mahadevi Upasana, something that's like a universal divine, then that can be very creative. I can go to Puranas, I can go to chakras, I can do all kinds of aritis, I can do all kinds of things and create something. Or like this Oriya author who wrote a social critique in 1902. He's the first author. And being asked to write, to create an Odissi production on this for a conference that Delhi University and Cornell did. So it's like keeping in mind the aesthetic of Odissi, which is beautiful. You know, it's pretty. I mean, I don't like to say pretty. It isn't pretty. But it is lyrical, it is sculpturesque, it is balanced, it is, you know, all those things. So how to take this text where you're being ironic when you're talking about ugliness, how to do it in Odissi and be true to the style, okay? So, you know, I think I found a way. And the way was that when I'm doing this, it's in Abhinaya with a spoken text. And then the dances are done in Oriya and are sung, you know, work that out. But in terms of the choreography, other languages are not a problem as long as the theme is correct and as long as you're true to the aesthetics of that music and it's that music, the text, and Odissi. And how you do that, you got to figure that out, you know, and get advice. Okay, so now I'm going to show you another short sloka, Omkarkarini. And the difference of this one to the last one is that you're internalizing it. You are. You are she who is the form of Om. Take my egotism and dispel it. Now again, when you go into the text, you discover that, oh, there's many levels of egotism. And which one are you dispelling? So every time you have a text, you are getting a chance to really understand something that you never would have looked at, never would have gone into with such depth, and you're going into it with this depth because you have the responsibility of communicating it to your audience who has not done that research, may not understand that philosophy, or the words and all of those things. So you're dissecting, unpeeling the onion, all of these different egotisms, and then you're going to show it, how you do that. And then, for instance, in the poetry, there's, I could dissect it after, but it's like the line of Murali. So this is then a play that the Murali, the sound of Murali fills the universe. Well, this is Murali is, of course, Krishna's flute, but it's also the name of the poet. Who's the poet? Balamurali Krishna, right? Who's a modern saint poet, really. And so, you know, you've got like these, you've got sweetness, you've got Krishna, you've got that. So you've got all of these things and you try to connect it. Okay, so this is Omkarkarini, which was composed by Balamurali Krishna. Even the rag is interesting because he was at a conference where they determined that in order to create a rag, you have to have 5 notes. And so he promptly did this in 4. So, so this is the internalized version, Omkara. Okay.
सुधा लहरी बिहारी पुररी प्रेमिका त्रिपुर सुंदरी मुरली सुधा लहरी बिहारी पुररी प्रेमिका त्रिपुर सुंदरी करुणा रसभरित ललित लवंगी करुणा रसभरित ललित लवंगी वरदा अभयदा सकल शुभांगी करुणा रसभरित ललित लवंगी वरदा अभयदा सकल शुभांगी Om